All right, hi everybody. Thanks again for attending TCF. In about a minute, Abraham and Heather are going to start their talk on mobilizing your town using CAD maps with students. I look forward to hearing what they're going to talk about. But without further ado, I'm going to give them the floor and let them talk. They have until around 1:20, so thanks, Cam.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. How are you? So I'm really thrilled to be here with my co-presenter, Abraham Rodriguez. And I'm going to sort of talk for the first couple of minutes. And then Mr. Rodriguez is going to take over, and then we're going to kind of do a little acting, dual action. Mr. Rodriguez, I'll go through just sort of the intro info and then slides, and then I'm going to hand it off to you. So first we're going to talk a little bit about us. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the partnerships that have developed. I'm going to talk a little bit about civic engagement. I'm a lawyer, so it kind of comes with the territory. And then we're going to talk a little bit about training students specifically as it relates to environmental issues. We all know that it's been almost 2 years exactly since we've been in the pandemic here in the United States. So talk about a little bit of the challenges, then talk about connecting diverse populations, work-based learning, and then Mr. Rodriguez will take over and talk about some of the CAD design issues, and then we'll finish up. And we wanted to leave about 10 minutes for some questions. So hopefully, if you have some questions, you want to put them in the chat. Because there's two of us, I can keep an eye on them when Mr. Rodriguez is talking and we can pull them out. But if you want to just take yourself off mute and ask the questions, that works as well. So without further ado, we'll go on to the next slide. So this gives you a little bit of information about the missions of our two organizations. Mr. Rodriguez is affiliated with the Williamsburg High School for Architecture and Design, and I have a nonprofit I started approximately 12 years ago called Health for Youth. And I just want to give you sort of the 2-second version of who I am, so you're not sitting there thinking, who is this human being talking to us? Why is she talking to us? Well, I shall tell you. So my name is Heather Butts. By way of sort of understanding the trajectory of how I got to be here in this moment talking with you, I did my undergraduate work at Princeton University, and my focus was Afro-Am and African studies. But at heart, I'm an old-timey history person, so that's what my focus was. From there, I went to law school for good as opposed to eval. So I'm a lawyer, and I did my work around healthcare generally. But to be honest with you, I kind of thought I would live out my days being a Medicare, Medicaid lawyer. Then two things happened, the Affordable Care Act and COVID, and that changed my plans a little bit. But went to law school, focused on healthcare. From there, I got my master's degree in public health at Harvard University and did an accelerated program in law and public health. And then after that, I did what all good lawyers do, is I got a job. So I worked for a couple of years working for Health and Human Services in the Office of the Secretary under the Office of the President of the United States. That was pretty interesting. And then I worked for a couple of years as a consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers doing essentially risk assessment, compliance, regulatory work. Worked for a few more years and then got my master's in education at Teachers College in clinical psych and psychology and education, specifically focusing on adolescents. So that's my trajectory. I started the nonprofit basically because I saw a gap, and I thought it was a pretty large gaping hole, a chasm really. And this had to do with young people who were in organizations. So let's say you had somebody that was in 12th grade and they were part of a nonprofit or a youth organization. They go to college, they lose the support that they had, and then it becomes very difficult for them to stay in college. So a lot of students, they get to college, they go home for break, and then they don't come back. So that was the reason that I decided to start my nonprofit. It's a college readiness nonprofit, but we do a lot more than that now, and we are a service provider for other organizations. We work with approximately 105 nonprofits in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And we work with approximately 5,000 students per year, bringing them all sorts of programming, events, projects, just like the one we're going to talk about. So that's it. In my current life, I am an associate professor at Long Island University, and I am also a lecturer at Columbia University. I also am a adjunct. I have a couple jobs. I have a job or two. And I'm also a adjunct at St. John's Law School. All right, so that is a little bit about us. And when Mr. Rodriguez talks, he'll give you more in terms of who he is and what he does. All right, so moving on to the next slide. So partnerships. So this is basically the landscape of the project. Who are the players in this project and how did it come to be? So the players really are the high school itself, Williamsburg High School. Again, you'll hear a lot more about the high school from Mr. Rodriguez, Health for Youths, Monmouth University, Lake Como, obviously. And want to take a moment to thank Professor Jeff Warrad and John Gibbons, who you heard from earlier today. I want to acknowledge them and thank them. Without them, this partnership would obviously not be what it is today. So these are the players. You see some of them in the picture below. This was from one of the several projects that we've done with Lake Como and the Williamsburg High School for Architecture and Design and Health for Youth. And this is going to be a recurring theme in this presentation. It's this group coming together to do wonderful, fabulous things. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Weber, who you see in the middle of the picture. I don't know if she is going to be on today, but she's been instrumental in helping us in these additional stages of the project. She is the current environmental commissioner for Lake Como. And really want to give her a lot of thanks as well, because again, and we're going to talk about this, you really need partners who believe in the work that you're doing and understand what you're doing in order to make it happen. Without that, it's impossible. It can't be done. So you'll hear that as another running theme throughout this presentation. Okay, next slide. Right, so challenges. So this project started in late 2018. So the interesting thing about this project is it has had a pre-COVID life and it has had a COVID life. And then whatever you consider this era, it's having that. I'm a public health professional. I have my own thoughts about what this era is, but whatever you'd like to call this, it's having that life. Before COVID started, the students were able to spend a decent amount of time with people in Lake Como. So they would visit, they did projects, they were able to have stakeholder involvement. And again, when we think about stakeholders, it's not just limited to the client, as it were. Everybody's a stakeholder. Post March 2020, things became somewhat more complicated. So we went to a remote platform, and Mr. Rodriguez will talk a little bit more about that. But then there were other issues. How do you keep 16, 17-year-old students engaged? And that's a group effort. So that involves parents, that involves partners, that involves teachers, that involves other students, that involves peers doing that. So that was one of the issues. Mentors. We needed to have a cadre of mentors that were able to work with the students and help keep them engaged. Training students to work collaboratively with groups online. This work does not get done with somebody sitting off by themselves trying to get it done. It has to be done collaboratively. Nothing is going to be successful in work like this if somebody is off doing it by themselves, and that involves the students, people in the town, all of us. So we had to really think about how are we going to work in a collaborative fashion online. That was challenging. It took a while to figure it out. We might still be figuring it out. Efforts to keep students positively motivated. This was one of the bigger challenges. Mr. Rodriguez and I meet once a week, and we talk about this a lot in terms of keeping students motivated. You know, trauma sets in. depression can set in. So how do we work with that? How do we make sure that their mental health is where it needs to be, that they're engaged, that they're motivated? These are all things that we talk about a lot, and it's a constant source of focus for us. And then involving students in meaningful work that has real world environmental impacts. This was important to all of us. It's a huge reason why we decided to do this work and this project. And the ability to be able to make this not a thought exercise. You know, when you're a young person, a lot of what can bother you is you think to yourself, adults don't really take me seriously. They don't think that I have anything to contribute. They think that they're the only ones that have something to contribute. And we adults, we can do that sometimes. So the ability to have a project that had real world impact from an environmental perspective, and that the students could actually see that impact and future gains for Lake Como, that was important to us. And I would say from the student's perspective, and certainly from our perspective as partners and the town's perspective, we have achieved that. Next slide. All right, so value to the town, value to the students. This is going back to the last slide I was talking about, thinking about how do you have value added? How do you have value added for a town? How do you have value added for students? Well, creative thinking, collaborative work. You're going to see me say that a lot, and both Mr. Rodriguez and I, that will be a theme. Collaboration, collaborative work, thinking about how you can do this in a way so that it has meaning for all the stakeholders, not just a few of the stakeholders. Having a variety of views. Everybody didn't agree all the time. In fact, I would say more often than not, people didn't agree. But yet, how do you get to a place where you can say, I don't necessarily agree with your perspective, but I respect your perspective. And I understand that in order for us to get to where we need to get to, we have to figure out how we can honor your perspective and at the same time honor where we need to end up and we need to land. It's a variety of views. Learning about the environment, that's why we're here, and that's why the students were there. And then things like time management, soft skills, as well as technical skills. These were all things that the students were able to learn in real time and incorporate into the project. Next slide, please. All right, Mr. Rodriguez and I both really like this slide. So this gives you a picture of who we're talking about, right? So I think diversity is a really catchy buzzword these days. Oh, diversity, we're all trying to be in the mix with diversity, right? But how many people actually practice it? I would say not that many. This project really brought together two entities that are about as different from a diversity standpoint as one can think. This is just an example, right? So Lake Como is 90.46% white. The Wasad community is 6.4% white, right? The majority of students at this school are students of color, and the majority of people who live in Lake Como are not. And so one might say to oneself, well, how will these two seemingly disparate groups of people get along? The answer is they got along exceedingly well, but that doesn't happen overnight. And one of the things that one needs to do when one is thinking about groups that may not at first blush have a lot in common with each other is to think about how do you find the common ground? And so that's the work, I would say the hard work that we have done over the last almost 4 years is by true bonding, true acceptance, true understanding, that ability to be able to have these students interact with the people in the town and vice versa has gotten us to that. And we have people in Lake Como who on more than one occasion have said that they anticipate that there will be students from Wasad that come to live in Lake Como when they get older. Lake Como is a town of 1,800, not in the summer, and a little bit over 5,000 in the summertime. And it makes me smile every time I think about that people in this town have so embraced these students that they could see them being part of their community when these students get older. That's what true diversity is really about. It's not a thought exercise. It's not a think piece. It's when people come together and they bond for a common good, for commonality. And that's what has happened here. Next slide, please. All right, so I mentioned I'm a lawyer, so we got to get some civics and legal framing in here. So civics lesson. One of the other things that we definitely wanted to make sure with respect to this project was the civics. How did the students learn how to work with the town? How did they just learn how to present to a town? So we've spent a decent amount of time with the students learning how to create presentations, learning how to collaborate with town officials. These students are from New York City. The ability to have a meaningful conversation with the mayor of a town, probably a lot of them won't be able to have a deep conversation with Mayor Eric Adams. They might, they're pretty savvy young people, so maybe, but probably not. But the ability to have a conversation with the mayor of a town, with the town council, with the environmental commissioner, these are things that for young people, they're extremely impactful. So we worked with them on that, and they were able to do that. Learning about environmental laws and ordinances. Actually, I mean, these are things that even the law students that I teach don't necessarily get to do in real time. Being able to talk with the people that came up with these laws, the legislative history behind the laws. Why did the town decide to create that law in the way that they did? The legislative history, it's super interesting. You can talk to the people that did it. Understanding partner needs and concerns, and how to work with the town and the town officials. And then finally, civics also has to do with how you as a community member engage with your community. So how to be an engaged community member, which is helpful both for the town and for the students. How do you engage? The next slide, please. Right, and then regulatory lessons for the students in the town. So reading an ordinance, that's a great lesson. Do you understand legislative history? Meaning, do you understand why the law was actually passed? How do you define environmental legal issues? What's a definition of a street? There are definitions. What's the definition of a sidewalk? What remediations are permissible? You can suggest lots of things, but can you actually do them? Next slide, please. And then just future research ideas. In addition to being a law professor, I'm a researcher. So thinking about how we can expand the school's curriculum, quantitative versus qualitative data collection, surveys of the town, of the people there, of the students. What did they get from these projects? What are the outcomes? An oral history project, which I would love to do at some point, getting these stories firsthand from people and collecting them would be fascinating. So these are all things that we can think about in terms of the future of the project potentially. And I think we're getting to Mr. Rodriguez's point. So I'm going to go over to him, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So
absolutely, thank you.
Rodriguez.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, so a little bit about me before I begin with my part. I am Abraham Rodriguez, Mr. Rodriguez. I currently teach the sophomore class of architecture and design, where I introduce the students to computer-aided drafting and design thinking. I graduated from New York City College of Technology, where I did architectural technology, a bachelor's in architectural technology, and I just acquired my master's in sustainability from the City College of New York. I've been working for WASAD for about 7 years. Most of the time was teaching the freshman class, where I introduced students to basic hand drafting skills and introduction to AutoCAD. But I've also had a very strong passion towards what we do around this project, which is work-based learning at our school. And again, the ability to connect with community organizations and industry partners to sort of develop a support system for students to have meaningful experiences that allows them to have real world applications and solve problems along with the community. And this is what this entire project with the community of Lake Como has really highlighted here. So, the purpose of work-based learning for us in our school is to really have the students investigate environmental, social, and cultural aspects of communities to solve problems. The ability, as Ms. Butts had mentioned before, collaborate in teams, engage with industry partners and stakeholders to come up with architectural designs, and having the students engage through schematic design and basic computer-aided drafting. And then again, obviously, to prepare deliverables for presentations to stakeholders. As you can see here, again, it's just a simple diagram of the high school network around the work-based learning program and that ecosystem that really establishes a sort of a robust system for us and allows the student to really pursue these types of learning experiences. With that said, within the work-based learning, and again, being someone who is passionate about sustainability and the importance that sustainability needs to play in our current educational curriculum, you know, we want the students to understand that everything is interconnected and that there are planetary boundaries, there are social, economic boundaries, there are environmental boundaries, and that they're all still interconnected. And one interesting diagram that I like to show a lot is in order to understand sustainable development is the donut of social and planetary boundaries, where we introduce the students to, you know, what are the social foundations, what are the things that, you know, we really need to make sure are taken care of or are studied, and sort of the problems that we're solving for around, you know, food, water, income, education, resiliency, gender equality, social equity, and also how that plays a role in us really pushing for making sure that our environment is also protected as well. And again, this is all through developing this sort of interdisciplinary work-based learning experience for students with public-private partners and state and community stakeholders. So I'm here to actually highlight two of the projects that we've been collaborating with the community of Lake Como. The first one, as Mr. Gibbons had mentioned before, is the Lake Como's Fun and Wildlife Lakefront Park that was designed by two of our now current seniors, Mahalia Santalai and Dizelle Thompson. And then the current project that one of our junior students is working on, Kevin Garcia, and it's the Lake Como's Pathway to the Lake. And what you see here also is the contributing students. You know, at the beginning, it all started with school-wide design competitions, and then it trickled down to winning teams, and then the teams who had graduated, and then the following teams who had to sort of pick up on the project and continue it. So just a quick overview of what Mr. Gibbons had gone through in terms of Lake Como's overall mission, again, is to create an environmentally and social beneficial pathway between Main Street and Lakefront. So this is the pathway to the lake here as well. And then the Lakefront Fun and Wildlife Park. All right, so this again, we were supposed to have students present these, but they weren't able to attend, so I'm pretty much covering for them. The Lake Como's Fun and Wildlife Lakefront Park design. Again, the purpose of this project was to, you know, introduce the students to, you know, design in landscape, environmentalism, and again, it was to create a scenic, natural aesthetic for the community, preserve the natural aesthetics or natural components of the lakefront, and to reintroduce native species and remove invasive species. And again, the overall objective for this one as well was to create lake attractions that provide social and economic benefit for the community, and as well as implementing the concept of a living shoreline for environmental remediation. So the project really began with introducing the students to, you know, site analysis and having the students actually come in to the neighborhood, visit Lake Como, and document existing conditions of the site. They also utilize Google Earth maps as well, Street View, but they also documented and took pictures and were able to sort of see by themselves the potential that the lakefront has and some of the areas for improvements. The students were able to understand the importance of removing invasive species and sort of the environmental impacts that they have in the communities and in wildlife and biodiversity. The students were able to, again, look into native and pollinator plant species and understand the importance of biodiversity and how pollinators help improve the ecosystem and maintain habitats. Again, continuing on with students investigating the different types of plants that attract pollinators. There was part of the student research was that they actually looked at the color spectrum and had realized that they had found research that based off of the color spectrum, it does attract certain pollinators. So then they were selecting certain plants depending on how it fell on the color spectrum as well, which was pretty interesting. Then the students also engage in research relating to what we call living shorelines. And living shorelines instead of hard shorelines is that living shorelines allow for habitat creation and sort of boost biodiversity. It allows also to filter out the polluting nutrients that go into the lake. And this was one of the main features that the community of Lake Como really wanted to incorporate. Other potential applications of using ecological engineering and environmental approach to design was to look into floating wetlands as a way to sort of remediate the pollution of stormwater runoff into the lake. And the students were able to also understand that floating wetlands can also provide other ecosystem services, such as, again, terrestrial habitat creation, aquatic, and provide water quality treatment and erosion control. Students also looked into different types of ways that small little design projects can play a role in environmental stewardship. In this case, they looked at a greenhouse proposal to host small classes for elementary school children, so they can come in and sort of learn about native plants and pollinator plants as well. So the design process was very collaborative. Again, Mr. Gibbons, who would come up from New Jersey all the way up to New York, was able to interact with our students, again, engage in sketching and deep conversations about, what is it that will make this lakefront an attraction, and also how to really incorporate some of the environmental aesthetic qualities for the town. And as you can see here, what you see down here is Kaylin Guzman and Joseph Valbueno. So these were the winning team from the first round of design competitions. And you see here Mahalia, who was able to sort of pick up on that design and then sort of improve along with Mr. Gibbons, sort of improve on it as well. And here on the right, you see the students sort of translating their design ideas into AutoCAD. So then through refinements, the students again sort of finalized an overall approach to the circulation around the Lake Como Lakefront Park. And as you can see here, this is the final drawing that they generated, again, showcasing the new programmatic elements, the plant beds, the living shoreline, and which I will go over in detail. So as you can see here on the east entrance, the students also incorporate a boardwalk. They have a fun park area for playground and other activities. Then there is a small little boat dock as well. There's this park entrance that actually leads into Parkway. And this here, the students had sort of proposed ideas for art installations or sculptures as a main entrance attraction. And then, as you can see here, just illustration of living shoreline, indicating living shorelines, and then pollinator and native species plant beds. Moving down towards the west, as you can see here, the students are also indicating in a veteran memorial. They have a yoga lake deck, and the reason why they had chosen a circular one was so depending of the time of day, the yoga sessions could actually be orientated based off of whether it's the sunset or sunrise and so forth. And moving downwards, they allocated space for park event areas and a new footbridge that would connect to the other town. And in this footbridge, they had sort of orientated exactly north to south. So like that, whoever crosses in understands the true north or true south of their location. Okay, so from design process, right, there are so many different learning opportunities and learning experiences that happen without us having to even think about them. Again, you know, it really started with the school-wide design competition, where we had about 12, I think it was about 8 to 10 teams, and then we had finalists. So this was a way to really activate the students and really try to see who were the students that really wanted to pursue this project even further. And we did site visits again to Candide's Garden to understand about, you know, from on our side, from the school side, we do a lot of community service, and in Brooklyn, we actually work with a lot of community gardens. So this was a great way for us to also not only work on a design project, but to also learn and create other programmatic sessions for the students to learn about community gardens. And this was a great opportunity through Candide's Garden to really have the students do that. And as you can see down over here, when the students planted fresh produce, Mr. Gibbons drove all the way up to Brooklyn to bring the kids the things that he had picked up. And, you know, the Candide's Garden, again, is also Monarch Way Station, is designated as a Monarch Way Station as well. So that sort of gave us inspiration into using our green spaces at our school and sort of activate them and create pollinator habitats. And we were also took part of the Sustainability Expo, and we utilized Lake Como's design project and the Monarch Way Station as our sort of showcase of sustainability practices. Again, the students learning how to engage with stakeholders and documenting existing conditions through site visits. Research and presenting research was a very valuable experience in this, and this happened many, many times, as well as design sessions where the students were actually printing out aerial satellite imagery and sketching over them using tracing paper and coming up with ideas and discussing with Mr. Gibbons and his team. And then obviously there were work sessions where the students were pretty much developing and producing visuals. So that was the Lake Como, the lakefront project. And now we are stepping into the second one, which is the Lake Como's Pathway to the Lake. Again, this is part of one of the projects for Lake Como. And again, this one has to do specifically with remediating some of the current challenges in regards to unruly behavior, vehicle speeding, and so forth. All right. So just to give you a quick overview of the scope of work, this is 18th Street and this is Parkway, and these are the two designated streets that the students were assigned to sort of look into and collaborate with Mr. Gibbons on. And then again, the students, as part of this remediation process, the students are finding solutions to chronic problems such as speeding, vehicle noise, parking, littering, and unruly weekend behaviors. So this presentation is laid out in, they developed a CAD layout, and then they looked into different solutions for speeding, pedestrian and bicycles, vehicle noise, parking, unruly behavior, and litter. And again, the objective for the remediation part of this was to really improve the quality of life of Lake Como, to be able to connect the community, and again, to provide an environmental vision to the site. Okay, so the main priorities was to, again, really emphasize the need for the quality of life for residents and pedestrians and allow for new bicycle routes to engage with the surrounding environment. And special priority was to emergency services and again, sort of looking at automobiles or motorcycles as sort of like the minor priorities in terms of the remediation process. Okay, so existing conditions, again, the students were able to sort of document, again, through Mr. Gibbons, because this project was done mostly remote. So Mr. Gibbons had to sort of provide a lot of the documentation that was happening in the neighborhood, again, relating to litter, traffic speeding and parking, and again, unruly behavior on the weekends. So this is one of the CAD drawings that the students were able to produce, again, showcasing the bike lanes on 18th Avenue. And again, looking at possible solutions for traffic going in both directions year round, allocating parking only on the north side, and providing traffic calming measures, again, like adding new crosswalks and adding a median to the street. And again, by implementing shared bike lanes. Okay, so these are some of the existing conditions. As you can see up here, the students were able to use Photoshop, use Google Earth Street View, and then bring it into Photoshop to then do some simple overlays of proposals. Again, illustrating the crosswalks and the new proposed bike lane. So this is another proposed layout for Parkway, which is the main street that leads into the lakefront for Lake Como. Again, very similar CAD work, again, introducing the medium and new crosswalks to mitigate some of the speeding and unruly behavior that happens. Again, the students did very similar studies where they are looking at again, a street view and then sort of using Photoshop to sort of illustrate their proposals. Okay, same here. And, you know, another part of this work-based learning program is that we want the students to familiarize themselves with a variety of digital tools that they can use to learn and collaborate and to solve problems. And in this one, again, ArcGIS is another one that we are trying to really incorporate into our curriculum because we find the need for geospatial analytics and sort of information overlay to really showcase and explore solutions. Students looked into, again, parking proposals, vehicle noise, and again, as Ms. Butts had mentioned before, looking into ordinances and developing proposal based off of that as well. And allocating trash bins for 18th Avenue and Parkway. So I would like to talk a little bit more about, again, just very similar to the work-based learning experiences that happen, you know, so how does this also translate into digital learning opportunities, right? And what you see here, well, I would like to sort of let you know a little bit about the Miro board, which is an online collaborative whiteboard. And it has really accelerated the level of sort of resource sharing and also communication and research, collaborative research as well. And I know that this is, you could see this as clusters of information, but they also pinpoint to all the many different types of interaction and conversations that occurred between the community liaison, the stakeholders from Lake Como and the students themselves. So this was a tool for the students to pretty much use it as a way to brainstorm, develop ideas, talk about their ideas. And not only that, the tool also allowed them to create sort of project management tools, as you can see here on the right, where Mr. Gibbons and sort of the team captain, which was Kevin Garcia, would sort of write down the task for the week, and then the students were able to sort of either place them on the side and say in progress or completed. So this really allowed for a more sort of interactive, immersive way of collaborating. And we found that it really helped us a lot. And we have been sort of deploying this and scaling this among many other different work-based learning projects. And we've seen the effectiveness of this tool in our collaborative environments. Again, talking about computer-aided drafting and satellite imagery, the students, again, are familiarizing themselves with geospatial awareness by navigating through Google Earth in 3 dimensions or in 2D, and being able to translate information into CAD drawings and then propose new solutions. Okay. Again, using the mirror board, very similar exercises where the students are bringing in visuals and satellite imagery into their collaborative whiteboard and performing virtual sites and talking about existing conditions just remotely. You know, there were students in part of this project currently that have never been to Lake Como, and they were able to sort of, along with Mr. Gibbons, sort of get an idea of the existing conditions of the area. Other exercises that were given, again, were for students to actually go out themselves and start documenting and sort of looking at existing conditions and performing field surveys. So with all of this said, there's a tremendous opportunity for us to really scale this within our school, but we also hope to see these types of interactions happening among many other schools in our neighborhoods as well. Again, this really boosts student engagement and career readiness. We understand that there's a steady growth of work-based learning network, again, of industry partners wanting to be involved. Now we have Gensler, an architecture firm based in New York, but it's also a global firm that is now willing to provide us with professional mentors and subject matter experts to help the students, along with the stakeholders, sort of produce and solve problems in these projects. And again, it allows the students to really develop communication, design thinking, visualization, digital literacy skills that are very important in the 21st century workforce. And then some of our challenges, again, this is something that we would like to provide to all of our student population, but obviously there is also staffing, I guess, walls that are sort of limiting for us, again, because again, I teach. I have 34 students per period. I have only 45 minutes to teach them, and I go through 160 kids a day. So at the end of the day, when I'm facilitating these type of projects, I'm pretty much spread a little bit thin, but this is something that we know it's promising for the students, and we want to continue to support them as much as we can. We also are looking to allow the students to not only use digital tools, but to also translate this into also digital manufacturing. Perhaps if the students, let's say, for example, they're doing a design of a greenhouse, then they can use CAD and then use digital manufacturing to actually produce prototypes of these structures. And then again, our future goals is to continue to boost leadership and sustainability within our work-based learning and our student community. Again, introduce systems and design thinking, and continue to expand our multi-partner sort of collaboration with high schools. And again, you know, connecting students with local professionals is something that augments these types of work-based learning activities. So this kind of works in parallel, again, through lectures, tutorials, virtual tours, recommendation letters, workshops, and so forth. This is pretty much where we end. Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy to open it up now.
Yes, absolutely.
Comments. Again, I want to thank everybody who's participating in this, and I want to especially thank Mr. Gibbons, Jeff Ford, and then of course, all respect to Mr. Rodriguez, who has been a delight and pleasure to work with over
likewise
many years. So thank you for your kind words. Questions, comments. I'm getting to like professor mode. Questions, comments, thoughts, comments. Anybody that has a question for us or comments about some of the work that you saw? I'm just looking at the chat to see if anything comes up. I'm going to wait like 30 more seconds, and then I'm going to expand on one thing that, oh, okay. So hi, Susan Fowler. Susan Fowler, a dear friend, that night. So Susan Fowler's question is about how many hours do the students work on the project? That's actually a very
good question. Yes.
I think
they could go for it.
I'll let you. Well, you know what's very interesting about that question too, Susan Fowler, is there's there's different perspectives on work, right? What's the definition of work? So there's the stakeholder perspective. There's obviously the school perspective, and then there's a lot in terms of prep time. So I'd actually be interested in Mr. Rodriguez's thought on that. I can give my perspective in terms of a stakeholder, then also as a partner. But Mr. Rodriguez, can you talk about first?
Yes, definitely. So how many hours do students work on the projects? And so throughout the week, what we have is, again, the students are working on this extracurricular. So they are not working on it during their academic time. So our work-based learning program really starts from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. from Monday through Thursdays. And then we give the students 1 hour to meet, one hour once a week to meet with their stakeholder as part of a workshop when the stakeholders actually provide feedback and collaborate with the students. And then the remaining hours are spent on doing research, again, and producing some of the work as well.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. So my role is kind of interesting. So I am both a stakeholder. I'm one of the partners of this project. Obviously, I've been working with the school for a long time. One of the projects that we're working on is the Health for Youth Skyline Community Garden. So I'm fortunate that the nonprofit that I run has a community garden based in Staten Island, New York, in an area known as New Brighton. And one of the projects that the students are working on is basically to reimagine this garden, right? So in addition to the Lake Como project, there's all these other projects that the students are working on that are work-based learning projects. And so I get to see the projects from that vantage point. And so the students have many tasks when they're doing these projects. So they have to manage the stakeholder relationships.
Yeah.
That's everything from communicating with the stakeholders by email, by text, by phone. A lot of that too is going to be mitigated by what the stakeholder can sustain, right? So some stakeholders, they want you to call them once a week.
Yeah.
Other stakeholders, don't call me. I just want to get emails from you. So the students have to manage that. They also have to set up meetings with the stakeholders. Additionally, they meet with the teachers, so they meet with them. They meet with their peers, they meet with their colleagues, and then they meet with the group as a whole. So that's a lot of management that the students have to do, which brings in both soft skills in terms of communication.
Right.
You've got to have a decent amount of communication. I know I referenced collaboration several times, but if you are not somebody that can get behind being able to work with people who may not communicate the way you do, may not collaborate in exactly the way you do, may not see the world in exactly the way you do, this would be a very challenging project for you. So one of the things that we work with the students on is just that. If you're somebody who's sort of in your silo bubble of this is the way I see the world, well, you know what, we're going to help you work on that. And
Exactly.
about how you can work with people who may not think the way you do. They may not look like you do. They may not have a background that you do. And how do we function so that you can work with them? So communication is huge. And for some students, they may have to put in more time and more work time because they need some help with their communication skills. I mean, Mr. Rodriguez and I have seen that in action where you have certain students who you got to work with them in terms of how they're communicating with people because what they're trying to convey may not be conveyed in the manner that they mean it to be conveyed. So that goes all into the work process. And
Yeah, definitely.
grow over time to the point where by the time they're juniors and seniors, there's real growth and development in terms of how they function and how they process information. So it's a journey, and some of them it's a longer journey, but it's gratifying to see the results that from like years of being able to do that kind of work and so forth. So yeah. Um, Oh, okay. Would you be willing to talk to our EC about your experiences? We have an opportunity to bridge our very different communities in South Jersey because a river flows through them, and would like your thoughts. That is lovely. Jamie, I don't know if you can get off of, I don't know if you can speak, or if maybe you're only able to chat, but I'm curious where you are in South Jersey, right? Where might you be? By the way, I just keep in mind, I'm a New Yorker. I went to Princeton undergrad, but in my mind, anything sort of south of Jersey City is South Jersey. So sorry. So we're in South. You might be in real South Jersey, I would imagine. Not.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I don't know. The Cooper River flows through Camden, but also goes through very different communities upstream.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of attention to develop the Cooper River Lake, but not upstream communities. And we've had a lot of difficulties bridging our communities. And we're looking at providing increased access to the river upstream.
Okay.
But I'm also interested in collaborating, not just on the river itself, but on bridging our communities. And Haddonfield, where I live, is a very small town. But if we draw on the resources of all the towns that are along the river, not all the towns, but those that are interested in participating, we can draw on not only community brain power and finances, but also students.
Yes.
So I've just started thinking about this because we've been focusing more on just the environmental assessment part of it. But this might be a great time and stage to do it. So yes, it is truly South Jersey as we define it. But it's interesting that a river provides an opportunity to bridge communities, and we don't usually think of it that way. Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I'll also let Mr. Rodriguez give his thoughts about this. My thought is a enthusiastic yes to that. I think that we can bring together our team. I mean, obviously, you probably figured out about me at this point. I like a good collaboration. So yes is the answer to that. I think it would be, I mean, it's funny when Mr. Rodriguez and I were talking about our presentation today, one of the things that we both said was that we would love it if out of this presentation, some collaborations came from it. And we could have the students meet even more people from other parts of the state and beyond. So you have fulfilled one of the gets that we had from doing this. So for that, I want to thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. Definitely we can get you our contact information. And I think, the other thing that COVID has been really challenging on a lot of different levels. But one thing that COVID has done for us is the ability to think very creatively and strategically about how we do reach out to people that may not be close to us physically. And so we've been working on it for a couple of years. And I think to the extent that we have a pretty good manner by which we have been able to do that with partners, working with you would be just the continuation of that. So I definitely will get you our contact information, and I would love to talk. Mr. Rodriguez, anything you want to add to that?
Oh, I mean, I think that that's exactly what we need to do with our students, is to really activate them and have them be part of these types of collaborative projects. Yep. Definitely.
And Susan Fowler asks, what about WSIDE and Health for Youth act as mentors for schools in South Jersey?
Yes, definitely.
You might want to do similar things as WSIDE and Health. I mean, again, I think
absolutely
when we think about this project and, we think about where we kind of all saw it going, all of the partners and collaborators. Yeah, I think that that's exactly where we saw it, Susan. Again, Jamie's question is in alignment where we wanted to go with this, and the ability to be able to do that in ways that honestly we wouldn't have really been able to conceive of 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, maybe somebody would have been able to conceive of it, but I'm not that crafty. But I think the ability to do that, our bandwidth has been greatly enhanced by the technology that is now, we're now able to access. So yes, for sure. We would love to act as mentors, such as someone like Jamie would think that what we have to bring would be of assistance. And so to the extent that we could do that, I think that would be beneficial for us and definitely beneficial for the students. Mr. Rodriguez, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that I'm all on board with that. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I have to say that I really admire the way you brought in civic relationships, political, environmental, science, technology, and even the arts and the design part of it. And it's not very often that we see those disciplines coming together. So it's very admirable to hear at a computer conference like this, those disciplines coming together. So thank you very much for that.
It was on the edge.
It's a pleasure.
Like, how would it be received? It was, 50-50, 60-40. So I appreciate your comments. And just, I know we have like 30 seconds left, but I just want to say, I actually really appreciate your comment, because one of the things that we think about a lot with this work is you can't do it in a vacuum. You can't sort of just kind of be rogue and just say, I'm just going to do this. And, I don't need to sort of check in with anybody. That's why I keep mentioning collaboration, because you have to think about who are the players, who are the stakeholders, who's going to be impacted by the work that you're doing and the suggestions that you're making. And if you can't do that, then this kind of work really is just going to sort of sit on the shelf and gather dust. So that you appreciate what we're trying to carry off here is very gratifying. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm going to give you the last word.
I think thank you all for having us here, and we look very much forward to collaborating. Definitely.
Right, and I just put my email in the chat for you, James, and anybody else that would like to be in touch, and I'll get you in touch with Mr. Rodriguez.